It was the summer of '87 when I first heard whispers about Jakub Rutka's UFO sightings. Growing up in a small town surrounded by vast fields and open skis, such stories were a staple of local folklore. No one knew much about Rutka himself, but his alleged encounters with extraterrestrial beings had captured everyone's attention. As I delved deeper into the mystery, I began to sense that something was off about Rutka's claims. He would often disappear for hours at a time, only to return with an unsettling gaze in his eyes. People would avoid him, whispering behind his back about the things he'd seen. I remember speaking with Rutka himself, trying to get a glimpse into the mind of a man who claimed to have witnessed something beyond our understanding. He spoke in hushed tones, glancing around nervously as if afraid of being overheard. His words were laced with an otherworldly fear, one that sent shivers down my spine. At first, I dismissed Rutka's stories as mere fantasies born from a restless mind. But the more I investigated, the more I realized that something was amiss. There were discrepancies in his accounts, inconsistencies that hinted at a deeper truth. And then there were the strange occurrences, equipment malfunctioning, strange lights flickering on and off, all of which seemed to be connected to Rutka's alleged encounters with the unknown. As I dug deeper, I began to feel an unsettling sense of unease. It was as if I was being pulled into a world where reality no longer applied, where the laws of physics were mere suggestions. And at the center of it all stood Jakub Rutka, a man consumed by forces beyond human comprehension. It was the summer of '87 when I first heard whispers about Jakub Rutka's UFO sightings. Growing up in a small town surrounded by vast fields and open skis, such stories were a staple of local folklore. No one knew much about Rutka himself, but his alleged encounters with extraterrestrial beings had captured everyone's attention. As I delved deeper into the mystery, I began to sense that something was off about Rutka's claims. He would often disappear for hours at a time, only to return with an unsettling gaze in his eyes. People would avoid him, whispering behind his back about the things he'd seen. I remember speaking with Rutka himself, trying to get a glimpse into the mind of a man who claimed to have witnessed something beyond our understanding. He spoke in hushed tones, glancing around nervously as if afraid of being overheard. His words were laced with an otherworldly fear, one that sent shivers down my spine. At first, I dismissed Rutka's stories as mere fantasies born from a restless mind. But the more I investigated, the more I realized that something was amiss. There were discrepancies in his accounts, inconsistencies that hinted at a deeper truth. And then there were the strange occurrences, equipment malfunctioning, strange lights flickering on and off, all of which seemed to be connected to Rutka's alleged encounters with the unknown. One evening, I decided to visit Rutka's farm, hoping to catch a glimpse of what might have triggered his experiences. The sun had long since set, casting an eerie twilight over the fields. Rutka greeted me at the door, his eyes red-rimmed from lack of sleep. He led me to the barn where he kept his prized possession, a battered old notebook. "Write down everything," Rutka whispered, as if afraid that someone might be listening. "Everything you see, hear, and feel. Write it all down, no matter how strange or impossible it seems." I took out my pen and began to write, as Rutka spoke in hushed tones of the first time he saw the UFO. He described a massive craft hovering above the fields, its lights pulsing like a malevolent heartbeat. The air was thick with an otherworldly energy, one that seemed to sear itself into his very being. As I wrote, the wind outside began to pick up, rustling the pages of Rutka's notebook and sending shivers down my spine. It was as if the unknown was closing in, trying to draw us into its dark realm. It was the summer of '87 when I first heard whispers about Jakub Rutka's UFO sightings. Growing up in a small town surrounded by vast fields and open skis, such stories were a staple of local folklore. No one knew much about Rutka himself, but his alleged encounters with extraterrestrial beings had captured everyone's attention. As I delved deeper into the mystery, I began to sense that something was off about Rutka's claims. He would often disappear for hours at a time, only to return with an unsettling gaze in his eyes. People would avoid him, whispering behind his back about the things he'd seen. I remember speaking with Rutka himself, trying to get a glimpse into the mind of a man who claimed to have witnessed something beyond our understanding. He spoke in hushed tones, glancing around nervously as if afraid of being overheard. His words were laced with an otherworldly fear, one that sent shivers down my spine. At first, I dismissed Rutka's stories as mere fantasies born from a restless mind. But the more I investigated, the more I realized that something was amiss. There were discrepancies in his accounts, inconsistencies that hinted at a deeper truth. And then there were the strange occurrences, equipment malfunctioning, strange lights flickering on and off, all of which seemed to be connected to Rutka's alleged encounters with the unknown. One evening, I decided to visit Rutka's farm, hoping to catch a glimpse of what might have triggered his experiences. The sun had long since set, casting an eerie twilight over the fields. Rutka greeted me at the door, his eyes red-rimmed from lack of sleep. He led me to the barn where he kept his prized possession, a battered old notebook. "Write down everything," Rutka whispered, as if afraid that someone might be listening. "Everything you see, hear, and feel. Write it all down, no matter how strange or impossible it seems." I took out my pen and began to write, as Rutka spoke in hushed tones of the first time he saw the UFO. He described a massive craft hovering above the fields, its lights pulsing like a malevolent heartbeat. The air was thick with an otherworldly energy, one that seemed to sear itself into his very being. As I wrote, the wind outside began to pick up, rustling the pages of Rutka's notebook and sending shivers down my spine. It was as if the unknown was closing in, trying to draw us into its dark realm. The words on the page seemed to blur together as Rutka's voice grew more urgent. "It was huge," he whispered. "A sphere, at least 1,000 feet across. The metal was like nothing I've ever seen before. It seemed to be absorbing and reflecting light at the same time." Suddenly, Rutka's eyes snapped towards something outside. He froze, his pen hovering over the paper as if waiting for inspiration to strike. "And then," he whispered, his voice barely audible, "I saw them." As I continued to investigate Rutka's UFO sightings, I began to notice an increase in activity around the farm. Equipment would malfunction, and strange noises could be heard in the dead of night. It was as if the unknown was growing restless, waiting for its next move. /n Rutka's behavior became more erratic, his eyes taking on a wild, paranoid gleam. He would talk for hours about the UFOs, pouring out his thoughts and feelings like a man possessed. I began to worry that he was losing himself in the experience, that the strange events were affecting him in ways I couldn't understand. /n One night, I received a call from Rutka, his voice trembling with fear. "It's happening again," he whispered. "The UFOs are coming back." /n I rushed to the farm, my heart pounding in my chest. As I arrived, I saw Rutka standing outside, staring up at the sky. The air was electric with tension, and I could feel the hairs on the back of my neck standing on end. /N/N, and then it happened. A bright light filled the sky, casting an otherworldly glow over the fields. The sound was like nothing I'd ever heard before, a low hum, followed by a series of piercing whines. It was as if the very fabric of reality was being torn apart. /N/N, Rutka stumbled towards me, his eyes wide with terror. "They're here," he whispered, his voice barely audible. "The beings are coming." /N/N, I stood frozen, unsure of what to do. The light grew brighter, illuminating the faces of the strange, twisted creatures that had emerged from the depths of space. They were unlike anything I'd ever seen before, tall, gaunt figures with skin like dark, polished wood. Their eyes glowed with an otherworldly energy, and I could feel their malevolent presence washing over me like a cold wave. As I watched the creatures from the UFOs, I couldn't shake the feeling that they were communicating with Rutka. He seemed to be under some sort of trance-like state, his eyes fixed on the beings as if he was being drawn into their world. Suddenly, a message appeared on the ground in front of us. It was scrawled in a strange, glowing script that seemed to pulse with an otherworldly energy. The words were unmistakable. They were a warning, a message from the creatures themselves. "Leave now," it read, "while you still can." I felt a chill run down my spine as I realized the implications of what we were seeing. These beings were not just aliens. They were something far more sinister. They were trying to communicate with Rutka, to draw him into their world and possibly even control him. Rutka seemed to be oblivious to the danger, however. He continued to stare at the creatures, his eyes glazed over as if he was in a trance. I knew that I had to act fast. I couldn't let these beings take over Rutka's mind and turn him into some sort of puppet for their nefarious purposes. I tried to grab Rutka's arm, to snap him out of the trance-like state he was in, but it was too late. The creatures began to move towards us, their eyes fixed on Rutka with an unnerving intensity. I knew that we were running out of time, and that our only hope for survival lay in deciphering the sinister messages left behind by these extraterrestrial beings. I knew that I had to act fast if I wanted to save Rutka from the creature's grasp. I frantically searched his room, looking for any clues that might help me understand what was happening. But every door I opened led to more questions than answers. Where were these creatures coming from? What did they want with Rutka? And most importantly, how could I stop them? As the hours ticked by, I became increasingly desperate. I scoured the internet for any information on similar cases, but every lead seemed to end in a dead end. I spoke to experts in the field of ufology, but they just shook their heads and told me that I was dealing with something beyond human comprehension. I knew that I had to think outside the box if I wanted to save Rutka, so I turned my attention to the strange symbols etched into the walls of his room. They seemed to be some sort of code, but I couldn't decipher their meaning. I spent hours poring over books on cryptography and coding theory, but no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't crack the code. Just when I was about to give up hope, I stumbled upon an obscure text that mentioned an ancient civilization that had been known for its advanced knowledge of cryptography. The book was written in an old language, but I managed to decipher some of the symbols and codes, and what I found sent shivers down my spine. The creatures were not just random visitors from space. They were part of a sinister plot to harness Rutka's unique energy signature for their own purposes. He had been chosen for his specific genetic makeup, which made him susceptible to their mind control techniques. And if I didn't act fast, they would use him to unlock the secrets of the universe. I knew that I had to act quickly, before it was too late. I gathered my thoughts and came up with a plan. I would use the ancient knowledge from the book to create a device that could disrupt the creature's mind control signals and free Rutka from their grasp. It was a long shot, but I had no other choice. With shaking hands, I began to assemble the device. The hours ticked by as I worked tirelessly, my heart pounding with anticipation. And then, just as I was about to finish, I heard a faint humming noise coming from outside Rutka's room. The creatures were back and they were closing in. I knew that I had to act fast if I wanted to save Rutka. I activated the device, and a blinding light filled the room. The creatures let out a deafening screech as their mind control signals were disrupted, and Rutka stumbled backwards, free from their grasp. But as the light faded, I saw something that made my blood run cold. The creatures had left behind a parting gift, a small, glowing crystal that seemed to pulse with an otherworldly energy, and etched into its surface was a single word: welcome. As I stood there, frozen in terror, the crystal seemed to pulse with an otherworldly energy. I felt a chill run down my spine as I realized that this was no ordinary alien artifact. It was something far more sinister, something that threatened to unravel the very fabric of our reality. I knew that I had to get Rutka away from here, but as I turned to leave, I saw something that made my blood run cold. The creatures were gone, but their presence still lingered in the air. And then, I saw it, a series of strange symbols etched into the walls, pulsing with the same energy as the crystal. I knew that I had stumbled upon something much bigger than myself, something that could potentially change our understanding of the universe forever. But as I reached out to touch the symbols, I felt a sudden surge of fear. What if these symbols were not just random markings? What if they held some kind of dark power? I knew that I had to be careful, but my curiosity got the better of me. I began to study the symbols, trying to decipher their meaning. And as I did, I started to feel a creeping sense of unease. The symbols seemed to be shifting, rearranging themselves in ways that defied logic. I knew that I was playing with fire, but I couldn't help myself. I had to know what these symbols meant, no matter the cost. And as I delved deeper into their mysteries, I began to uncover secrets that were better left unspoken. The more I learned, the more I realized that these symbols were not just random markings. They were a warning of an ancient power that lurked in the shadows, waiting to strike. And as I stood there, frozen in terror, I knew that I had stumbled upon something that would change my life forever. I was no longer just a researcher trying to uncover the truth. I was a conduit for an ancient and malevolent force. And as I looked at Rutka, I saw the same fear reflected back at me. We were in this together, trapped in a web of secrets and lies that threatened to consume us both. As I delved deeper into the mysteries of the symbols, I realized that I had to isolate myself from the outside world. The creatures were still out there, watching and waiting, and I knew that I couldn't trust anyone else with my findings. I began to keep a low profile, avoiding public places and gatherings. I stopped answering phone calls and emails, and even shut down my social media accounts. It was as if I was disappearing into the shadows, erasing myself from the world. But despite my best efforts, I couldn't shake off the feeling of being watched. The symbols seemed to be everywhere, pulsing with an otherworldly energy that seeped into my very soul. One night, I received a mysterious package in the mail. Inside, I found a small notebook filled with cryptic messages and diagrams. They were the work of someone who knew more about the symbols than I did, and yet They seemed to be trying to warn me away from something. I felt a chill run down my spine as I realized that I was not alone in this fight. There was someone else out there, someone who understood the danger that lurked in the shadows. But who were they, and what did they want from me? As I delved deeper into the notebook's secrets, I began to uncover a web of conspiracy that went far beyond my wildest imagination. The symbols were just the tip of the iceberg, and I knew that I had to tread carefully if I wanted to survive. The isolation was starting to take its toll on me, but I knew that I couldn't give up now. I had to keep pushing forward, no matter how terrifying the journey might be. For I knew that the truth was out there, waiting to be uncovered, and I was determined to find it, no matter what the cost. But as I sat in my dimly lit apartment, surrounded by the symbol's eerie glow, I couldn't shake off the feeling that I was being herded towards some unknown fate. The notebook's cryptic messages seemed to be leading me deeper into the heart of madness, and I wondered if I would ever find my way out. The isolation had become a double-edged sword. It had given me the freedom to explore the depths of the symbol's mysteries, but it had also cut me off from the world. And now, as I stared into the void, I knew that I was at a crossroads. Would I find the truth, or would I succumb to the madness that lurked in the shadows? As I delved deeper into the symbol's mysteries, I began to notice strange inconsistencies in the world around me. The laws of physics seemed to be bending and warping, as if reality itself was unraveling before my eyes. I saw objects moving on their own and heard whispers in the wind that seemed to come from nowhere. The notebook's cryptic messages had become more urgent, urging me to uncover the truth behind the symbol's power. One night, I received a mysterious phone call from an unknown number. A low, gravelly voice spoke on the other end, its words dripping with malevolence. "You've been playing with fire, little researcher," it said. "Now you'll have to face the consequences." The line went dead, and I was left staring at my phone in horror. I knew then that I had to get out of there, but as I turned to leave, I saw something that made my blood run cold. The symbols on the wall were changing, rearranging themselves into a new pattern. And then I saw it, a doorway where none had been before. It was as if reality itself was unraveling, revealing a portal to some unknown realm. I knew that I had to be brave, but my heart was racing with fear. I took a deep breath and stepped through the doorway, leaving behind the world I knew. On the other side, I found myself in a realm unlike anything I had ever seen. It was a place of twisted geometry and impossible geometry, where laws of physics no longer applied. I wandered through this strange realm, trying to make sense of what I saw. And then, I stumbled upon an ancient artifact, a crystal orb that pulsed with the same energy as the symbols. It spoke to me in a voice that echoed in my mind. "You have been chosen to unlock the secrets of the universe." As I held the orb, I felt my mind expanding, as if it was being stretched to its limits. The symbols' mysteries were finally revealed to me, and I saw the truth behind the portal. It was a doorway to other dimensions, other realities, and I knew that I had been chosen to explore them all. The world around me began to distort and warp, as if reality itself was unraveling. I felt my mind fragmenting, as if it was being pulled apart by the sheer weight of the secrets I now possessed. And then, everything went black. As I regained consciousness, I found myself in a desolate landscape devoid of any signs of life. The air was thick with an otherworldly silence, and the sky above was a deep, foreboding crimson. I stumbled to my feet, my mind reeling from the secrets I had uncovered. The symbols, the portal, the crystal orb, it all seemed so real yet so surreal. I knew that I had been changed forever by what I had seen. As I looked around, I saw a figure in the distance, walking towards me with an unnerving deliberation. It was Rutka, her eyes black as coal and her skin deathly pale. She approached me with an air of detachment, as if she were a specter from beyond the grave. "You see things now," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Things that no one else can see." I nodded, my mind racing with questions. "What have you seen?" I asked, but Rutka just shook her head. "The abyss gazes also into us," she replied, and with that she vanished into thin air. I was left standing alone in the desolate landscape, with only my thoughts to keep me company. The silence was deafening, and the darkness seemed to closing in around me. I knew that I had been given a glimpse into the abyss, a peek into the void that lay beyond the veil of reality. And I knew that I would never be able to look at the world in the same way again. I tried to shake off the feeling of unease that had settled over me, but it only seemed to intensify as I walked back to my apartment. Every step felt like a betrayal, every sound like a harbinger of doom. I couldn't shake the image of Rutka's dead eyes, or the way she had vanished into thin air. I knew that I had to get out of there to escape the weight of what I had seen. But as I approached my apartment building, I felt a presence following me. It was a creeping sense of dread, like something was watching me from just out of sight. I quickened my pace, but it only seemed to grow stronger. Suddenly, I heard footsteps behind me, heavy and deliberate. I spun around, ready to defend myself, but there was no one there. The sound stopped, and an oppressive silence fell over the area. I knew then that I wasn't alone. Something was with me, something that didn't want me to leave. I tried to run, but my legs were frozen in place. And then I saw them. Shadows moving on the walls, like dark tendrils reaching out to grab me. I knew that I was being stalked by some kind of entity, something that had been awakened by my meddling with forces beyond human control. The shadows began to take shape, forming into twisted, eldritch creatures that seemed to be made of darkness itself. They moved closer, their presence filling the air with an unspeakable horror. I tried to scream, but my voice was lost in the void. And then everything went black. As I lay there, I felt myself being pulled into the void. It was like a black hole had opened up beneath me, sucking me in with an irresistible force. I tried to struggle, but it was no use. The darkness closed in around me, and I was consumed by an eternal silence. I was lost in an endless void, with no escape from the crushing weight of nothingness. And yet, even as I felt myself being devoured by the abyss, I knew that I was not alone. There were others out there, trapped like me in this infinite expanse. We were all just specks of dust in an endless sea, drifting aimlessly towards oblivion. The thought was both terrifying and liberating. For the first time in my life, I felt truly free. Free from the burdens of existence, free from the weight of human responsibility. I was nothing more than a fleeting thought, a momentary perturbation in the vast and uncaring cosmos. And so I let go. I surrendered to the void, allowing it to swallow me whole. As I disappeared into the darkness, I knew that I would never be seen again. The world outside would move on without me, oblivious to my fate. But deep within the abyss, a spark of consciousness flickered to life. It was a small, cold flame, but it was enough to sustain me. And so I began to explore this endless void, searching for answers in the darkness. I discovered hidden worlds and unseen realms, each one more wondrous than the last. I met beings from beyond human comprehension, creatures that defied all logic and reason. And through it all, I realized that I was not just a lost soul, but a doorway to the infinite, a portal to the very fabric of existence itself.